the property management industry, fair housing offenses are considered especially troubling. In the United States, a dedicated fair housing attorney, Leslie Tucker, provides case explanations and best practices. These are some cases.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Fair Housing Insiders Case Files, episode 35 with Leslie Tucker, the principal of Williams, Edelstein, and Tucker, and I am your host, Jonathan Saar. We'd like to welcome everyone to the Fair Housing Insiders, your podcast. This podcast is your go-to resource for understanding fair housing laws and their practical application in property management. So, Leslie, welcome. Nice to have you here with us today.
Hi, Jonathan. Thanks for having me.
So today, we've got a nice, interesting case. Focuses on Lawrence County Recovery versus Village of Coal Grove. And this case shines a spotlight on zoning ordinances that disproportionately impact individuals in recovery from substance use disorders. So I can't remember talking about this particular type case before, so this is going to be an interesting and fascinating discussion. And everyone on our community, you're going to want to pay attention to this. So let's start with some context, Leslie. So can you give us a summary of the background of the case?
Yeah, sure. So Lawrence County Recovery, or LCR, operates independent living homes, and this is in Ohio, for individuals recovering from drug and alcohol addiction. These independent homes are very small. I believe they have a maximum occupancy of 6. And all the residents that are participating and that live in these homes are randomly drug and alcohol tested to ensure that, they're not continuing to use while they're living in these recovery homes. The purpose of these particular homes are, providing a supportive environment that helps these residents kind of reintegrate into their communities. But what happened is that the village of Coal Grove, where a couple of these homes are located, passed a series of ordinances that effectively restricted the operation of these homes. For instance, one of the ordinances required these recovery homes to obtain special licenses, undergo frequent inspections, and these types of requirements weren't imposed on other types of housing. This particular type of housing, these recovery homes. Another ordinance created a limit to the number of non-related persons that can reside together in one dwelling. And that ordinance didn't exist before, these homes were created. So the argument is that, potentially this was a result of the home's existence.
That's interesting. So the ordinances themselves weren't just neutral across the board, any type of housing safety measures. They were targeting recovery homes specifically?
Well, that's what the plaintiff's argument is. Certainly, these ordinances imposed burdens that made it significantly harder for these recovery homes to operate. The other thing is they were passed after a number of disparaging statements were made by village residents and the village solicitor. They made about people that were in addiction recovery. So that's kind of where the Fair Housing Act comes into play, because obviously we all know that the Fair Housing Act protects individuals with disabilities. And the plaintiff and the government, who submitted a statement of interest in this case, they are both arguing that individuals recovering from addiction fall into this category, this protected category.
Okay. So far, it's really clear that this case isn't just about local zoning. It's really talking about equal access for housing for those who are protected groups. So what are the legal issues? What's at the heart of this case?
So there are kind of 3 primary issues. And the first is about disability. Just to kind of, very basic, does this involve a protected class? the parties disagree whether individuals who are recovering from addiction are considered to be disabled under the Fair Housing Act. The FHA does specifically exclude individuals who are actively using or actively, addicted to illegal drugs or a controlled substance. That's not in question. But because the affected individuals here who are living in these homes, they're not actively using and actively addicted to illegal substances. So therefore, the plaintiff argues that, yes, they are covered. They are considered to be disabled because people in recovery have significant impairments that substantially limit major life activities, right? We get back to sort of the definition. Multiple other courts have also come to this conclusion as well. So, I'm not dispensing legal advice here. I'm not kind of commenting on the interpretation. I'm just kind of listing the issue. So that's the first major issue. The second is, does the FHA apply to city governments? Okay, this is an argument that's being put forth by the defendants here. Local governments are not technically housing providers in this case. But it's fairly well established that zoning and land use ordinances that hinder the ability of protected groups to obtain housing, yes, that is a fair housing issue. And those types of ordinances can certainly be challenged under the Fair Housing Act and have been many times in other cases. And the third issue is, are the city ordinances discriminatory, right? That's kind of at the heart of this case. So if the court agrees with the plaintiff's argument that recovery addicts are in fact disabled, they'll also need to show that the ordinances discriminate against these individuals by imposing these zoning laws, these zoning ordinances. And the plaintiff's argument includes the fact that the home wasn't able to continue operating because of these ordinances. They had a lengthy wait list, but they ultimately weren't able to continue helping people, as well as the disparaging statements made by the residents and the city solicitor. So those are all sort of relevant facts in this case.
Okay, understood. Thank you for breaking that down for our audience. And it's troubling to hear how these policies and the rhetoric that surrounds them could stigmatize individuals in recovery.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, cases like this also kind of remind us how far-reaching the Fair Housing Act is and how many decisions related to housing can be challenged and are challenged, particularly if those decisions result in any kind of limitation or reduction in housing opportunities like it did here. Okay.
So, yeah, deep case. I'm sure it touches a lot of people listening to this episode. It's an unfortunate challenge that many face. We understand it's a disability dealing with substance abuse. But let's just take a moment, step back. What are the broader implications of this case when it comes to fair housing?
Well, I think there are a couple of just broader implications. So for one, local governments are certainly subject to the Fair Housing Act when it comes to housing related decisions. So they have to kind of be careful in considering how their zoning laws can impact protected groups. Even when you're dealing with well-meaning laws, seemingly neutral laws, let's say they can have unintended discriminatory impacts on groups of people. So that's one. And the second, I think, is kind of related to this disability-related situation that we're talking about. Not just city governments can benefit from this discussion. Property managers and staff at the site level can certainly benefit from a discussion about substance abuse and addiction, because there are so many individuals who are impacted by this. Lots of applicants and lots of residents, certainly, that you serve. So there's an obvious, we know that there's a stigma associated with addiction. So it's really important to understand when these types of addictions constitute a disability and when they don't, because that certainly can impact on how you make decisions and how you act, as a result of certain requests or certain situations that you just encounter on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, absolutely. Wholeheartedly agree. Yeah. Every person, every type of property management, housing, professional, all of us, we can benefit from just taking a minute and examining this case. So thank you so much for breaking it down for us and helping us understand how it touches all of us. And to our listeners, we thank you for being here for this episode today. Thanks, Leslie.
Thanks.
So just a reminder to our listeners, if you've enjoyed this episode, thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing it. Thank you for liking it. Stay tuned for more discussions on fair housing topics. And we appreciate the opportunity to share this education with you because we know fair housing is such an important topic for our industry. So see you next time. Take care.